Supply chain has survived every crisis in history. It will survive this one too. I want to start with something that took me a long time to understand. This is not the worst supply chain era in history. I know that's a strange way to open a video about four global crises, but stay with me. Think about World War II. Between 1989 and 1945, supply chains were not disrupted. They were commandeered. Governments nationalized factories. Brand had zero say in what got manufactured, what got shipped, or who received it. Rubber, steel, cotton, fuel, all controlled. A business owner in 1943 didn't get to choose their supplier. They got allocated what was left after the war effort took what it needed. Then the 1970s, the OPEC oil embargo. October 1973, Arab oil producing nations cut off supply to the US and Western Europe as a political weapon. Overnight, fuel, the single input that touches every supply chain on earth, became scarce, rationed, and politically weaponized. Factories couldn't run. Trucks couldn't move. The inflationary spiral that followed lasted almost a decade. And think about what came before container shipping, before the standardized intermodal container became widely adopted. Before that, every single item loaded into a ship was handled individually, piece by piece by hand. Theft was common, damage was constant. Lead times were measured in months, not weeks. The idea of a reliable supply chain was almost a contradiction in terms. Here's what I find remarkable about all of that. They go through it, not perfectly, not without enormous pain, loss, and bad decisions, but they got through it. They rebuilt, they adopted, they invented new tools, new trade routes, new insurance instruments, new procurement strategies because the old ways broke. Every major disruption in supply chain history was produced a generation of practitioners who came out the other side smarter, more resilient, and with better systems than the generation before them. We are in that moment right now, our moment. And I genuinely believe that if we face it together and if we share that we're learning in real time, we can compress that adaptation from a decade into a year. That's why I made this video, not to scare you, not to make our era sound catastrophic, but to show you the full arc, where we've been, what we've survived, and what we've learned. And to hand you the playbook history has been building for over a century, I've been in supply chain for 17 years. I've worked enterprise, I've worked in DTC, I've been inside brand when the world broke, and I've been the person on the outside helping them put it back together. In the last 8 years alone, I've personally navigated four crises with real clients, real inventory, and real consequence. And today, I'm going to tell you everything, what I got wrong and what I got right, and what the whole sweep of supply chain history from World War II to right now has been trying to teach us all along. Grab something to drink, open a notes app. The moment the old rules died, the supply chain rules I learned in my first 10 years of this industry, dead. Not outdated, not in need of a little update, but dead. And the moment I realized that, really realized it, was not in the boardroom. It was not in a strategy session. It was at my desk at 11 p.m. looking at a container sitting on a ship that wasn't moving with a client who was about to run out of their best selling product 4 weeks before peak season. That was COVID 2020. But the feeling, I'd felt a version of it before. In 2018, during the US China tariff war, and I'd feel it again in 2023 with the Red Sea crisis, and I'm feeling echoes of it right now in 2026 as Middle East conflict rewrites freight economies for the third time in less than a decade. And in this video, I'm going to give you everything I know, not theory, not a framework I read in a book, what I actually live, what I got wrong, what I got right, and most importantly, the playbook I wish I'd had from day one. By the end of this, you're going to look at every future disruption differently, not with fear, with a plan. Let's go. I was working inside a DTC brand. We sourced almost everything from China, and I was good at my job. At least I thought I was. I had supplier relationships, I had lead time tracking, I had landed cost models. And then in July 2018, the US put a 25% tariff on roughly $34 billion worth of Chinese goods. I remember thinking, okay, this is a negotiation tactic. This will settle down. The economists on TV were saying it would settle down, and it did not settle down. By September 2018, we had a second round. Another $200 billion in goods got hit with tariff. And suddenly, every cost model I had built was wrong. Every landed cost calculation was fiction. And every DDP code from our supplier was being quietly rebuilt around a new reality that we hadn't priced in. The moment I realized the old rules were dead, here's the specific moment I want to tell you about. We had a supplier we'd worked with for 3 years. Great relationship, on time delivery, solid quality. We were in DDP or delivered duty paid, which meant they handled everything freight, insurance, customs. We just paid one number and products appeared at our door. And one day I got a message from our supplier, from our contact, very polite, very apologetic. They needed to discuss the pricing structure for our next order. The tariff increase has happened 4 weeks earlier. They had been absorbing it and now they couldn't anymore. So our all-in price, the number we had built our entire margin model around, was about to go up mid-relationship, mid-season planning cycle, and purchase orders already in motion. And I sat there and thought, I have been running supply chain like it's stable system, like the rules are fixed, like if I just do the right things, good suppliers, good lead times, good DDP arrangement, I'm protected. I wasn't protected. And I was just lucky. And luck ran out. That was the moment the old rules died for me. Not the tariff announcement, not the news coverage, that conversation with a supplier I trusted where I realized my whole model was built on that assumption that the world would stay still. The world does not stay still. What I did wrong. Let me tell you what I got wrong in 2018. Not what other brands got wrong, but what I got wrong. Mistake number one, I had no visibility into my supplier's cost structure. I knew the price I paid, I did not know what was inside the price. So when the tariff hit their component cost, I had no way to verify whether their price increase request was fair, aggressive, or necessary. I just had to trust them or fight them. Neither is a good place to be. Mistake number two, I had no diversification buffer. One country, one supplier cluster, one mode of transport. When the tariff hit Chinese goods specifically, I had nowhere to go. Brands that even have one alternative supplier in Vietnam or Bangladesh had options. I had a prayer. Mistake number three, and this one still stings. I waited for certainty before I acted. I keep thinking, let me see how this develops. Let me see if it gets resolved. And while I was waiting for certainty, our competitors were moving. They were renegotiating. They were shifting suppliers. They were locking in freight contracts before the market repriced. In supply chain, waiting for certainty is the most expensive thing you can do. By the time it's certain, everyone else has already moved. So what does work? Here's the tariff war playbook, the one I actually use now. First, cost itemization before crisis, not during. The brands that navigated the tariff war best were the ones who already had itemized cost sheet from suppliers. When duties changed, they could calculate the real impact instant. Second, diversification of origin, even partial. You do not need to leave China completely. You need one alternative for your top two or three SKUs. One relationship in another country, even a code, because having an option changes every negotiation you have with your existing suppliers. Third, Incoterms awareness. DDP is convenience, FOB is control. In a tariff volatile environment, control is worth more than a convenience. Fourth, scenario planning. The brands that won in the tariff war didn't predict it. They asked the questions early. What happens to our margin if duties go up by 10% or 25%? What is our break even? What do we do first? Those four things. That's the tariff war playbook. And tariff volatility is not over. It is never over. Next, the pandemic 2020 to 2021, when everything stopped. If the tariff war taught me that the rules could change, COVID taught me that the entire game could stop. March 2020, factories in China had been shut down since February. Ports were congested, airlines were grounding cargo flights, and every DTC brand I knew was scrambling. Some were staring at empty shelves, others were drowning in inventory they couldn't move because sales had evaporated overnight. There was no playbook for this. I want to be honest about that. Nobody had a COVID playbook. The supply chain industry, all of us, were making it up in real time. I had one client, a mid-sized DTC brand around $6 million in annual revenue, whose entire inventory of their top SKU was sitting on a container ship outside the port of Long Beach. The ship was anchored, it wasn't moving. And they had already sold the inventory through pre orders. They had a customer service emails piling up, refund requests coming in, and they had a founder who called me every single day, not for resolutions because there were no resolutions, just to talk through what was happening. Because the isolation of supply chain chaos in a pandemic, when you can't even go to your office, is unlike anything I had experienced before. That's what COVID was. It wasn't a supply chain problem, it was a supply chain collapse. The mistake everyone made, including me, let me tell you the mistake I saw everywhere in clients, in the industry, and honestly in my own thinking. Mistake one, assuming speed was the answer. When factories were open, every brand tried to rush orders through at the same time, which meant lead times didn't go back to normal. They doubled because everyone was trying to recover at once, and the system couldn't absorb the demand spike. I had clients who thought factories are open again, great, we'll be back to normal in 8 weeks. It took 6 months. The brand that assumed 8 weeks had stackouts through Q4. The brands that planned for 6 months, even if they hoped for 8 weeks, were fine. Mistake number two is relying on air freight as the rescue plan. Air freight during COVID was not a rescue plan. It was a lottery ticket with a price tag that could destroy an SKU margin entirely. I saw brands spend 40, 50, and even $80 per unit on air freight for products that has $30 of margin. They rescued the inventory and lost money doing it. Mistake number three, treating this like a temporary disruption. Once COVID is over, we'll get back to normal. That was the wrong phrase. COVID didn't disrupt supply chain. It revealed how fragile supply chain had always been. The normal we were going back to was never actually stable. We had just been lucky for a long time. Here's what actually worked during COVID. And I say this not to sound smart in hindsight, but because these are the exact things that I separated the brands that survived from the brands that didn't. One, radical transparency with customers. The brands that told customers, here's what's happening, here's what we're doing about it, and here's when we expect your order, had lower refund rates and higher loyalty than brands that went silent. People can handle bad news, they can't handle silence. Two, inventory triage. Not every SKU matters equally. The brand that quickly identified their top 20% of SKUs by revenue contribution and focused every available supply chain resource on those come out healthier than the brands that tried to rescue everything equally. You can't save everything in a crisis. Save what matters most. Three, supplier relationships that were real, not transactional, not just on portal, but real. The brands that had invested in genuine supplier relationship, that had visited factories, shared forecast data, paid on time, even when they didn't have to, those suppliers prioritized their orders. They got a production slots others didn't. Supplier relationships are a supply chain asset. The ROI just doesn't show up until everything breaks. Number four, safety stock recalibration. Post COVID, the brands that thrive moved from lean inventory models to resilient inventory models. They added buffer. They accepted that holding slightly more inventory was worth the working capital cost because running out was more expensive than holding extra in the right amount. The COVID playbook, here's what COVID taught me permanently. First, safety stock is not a waste. Before COVID, lean inventory was the gospel. COVID showed us that just in time is really just out of stock waiting to happen. Second, dual sourcing for your top three SKUs is non negotiable. Not dual suppliers in the same country, but dual suppliers in different geographies. Third, your supply chain is only as strong as your supplier's supply chain. Tier 2 and Tier 3 suppliers can break the chain just as badly as your direct supplier. And fourth, cash is the most important supply chain tool. The brands that survived COVID had cash reserves. They could afford to hold inventory longer, pay for expedited shipping when necessary, and weather revenue dips without making desperate supply chain decisions. Profitable brands with cash reserves have options. Cash strapped brands have emergencies. Now, a different kind of disruption by 2023. A lot of DTC founders thought they had supply chain figured out. COVID was over, port congestion had cleared, and lead times had normalized. For the first time 3 years, things were feeling predictable. And then Houthi militants started attacking container ships in the Red Sea. The Red Sea and the Suez Canal handle a huge share of global trade. When the route closed, ships had to reroute around the Cape of Good Hope, adding time and higher fuel costs to every voyage. Now, here's the thing, the Red Sea crisis didn't directly affect China to US shipments. Those go across the Pacific. So a lot of US DTC founders reasonably but wrongly assume this wasn't their problem. But indirect exposure is still exposure. How Red Sea found everyone. Here's how the Red Sea crisis landed on brands that never shipped through the Suez Canal. Global container capacity is a connected system. When you reroute a major chunk of global trade around the Cape, those ships takes longer. They are not available as quickly, so effective global container capacity drops. Rates go up across all lanes, including Trans-Pacific. Air cargo capacity gets squeezed too because some sea freight shifts to air. Insurance costs move too, and the global marine insurance your price exposure. The brands that understood indirect exposure had been preparing or at least paying attention. The brands that said it is a your problem were blindsided when their forwarder came back with a rate increase and a surcharge they hadn't budgeted for. In global trade, not my lane is never completely true. What the Red Sea taught me. The Red Sea crisis was different from the tariff war and COVID in one important way. It was fast. It went from ships are being attacked to global rates are up and lead times are extending in about 3 weeks. That speed is the new normal. Crises don't develop over months anymore. They develop over days, which means your supply chain intelligence system has to accelerate too. After the Red Sea, I built what I call a supply chain signal board for every client I work with. It's not complicated, it's four inputs monitored weekly. Spot freight rates on your main lanes, even if you're on contract. Carrier announcements, including surcharge notices and service suspensions. Insurance market signals, like war risk premiums and coverage changes. And air cargo capacity data on your key routes. Those four signals, checked weekly, would have given you 2 or 3 weeks of warning on every major disruption in the last 5 years. Not prediction, not certainty, but enough lead time to start making decisions instead of reacting. The Red Sea Playbook. Here's the Red Sea Playbook. Monitor freight signals weekly, not quarterly. Build your sea air or air freight contingency before you need it. Know your air forwarder. Know the cost per kilo for your top SKUs. Know which SKUs can absorb air freight and which ones cannot. Add 10 to 14 days to lead time estimates when there is any active regional shipping disruption, even if your lane is not directly affected. And have a surcharge conversation proactively. Call your supplier or forwarder when you see the signals moving. Ask, what their current surcharge exposure is. Ask what's coming. Ask how long their quote is valid. Do not wait for the invoice. Proactive conversations in supply chain always cost less than reactive ones. So here we are again, but smarter. March 2026, Middle East conflicts. Shipping activity through the Strait of Hormuz has dropped sharply. War risk insurance premiums are up. Airspace disruptions have taken major air cargo capacity offline almost overnight. Carriers are announcing emergency fuel surcharge. Spot rates are already moving. And here's what I noticed: I am not panicking. Not because this isn't serious, it is, but because I've been here before, 3 times before, and every time the brands that had systems, visibility, buffers, diversification, proactive communication came out better than the ones that were reacting. Now, let me tell you about something happening in parallel that might matter even more for some brands than the freight volatility: the de minimis squeeze. The de minimis is gone. For those who are not familiar, de minimis was the rule that allowed low value imports into the US without paying duty. It was the backbone of the cross border DTC model, and now the advantage is gone. And here's why it matters more than people realize: the freight volatility from the Middle East conflict and the de minimis suspension are hitting at the same time. So, if you're a brand that was relying on low value direct imports from China as a cost advantage, that advantage is gone. And the freight cost of your replacement strategy is going up at the same time. You are getting squeezed from both sides. Policy on one end, freight volatility on the other. This is real, but this is also where clear thinking matters most. Right now, here's what I'm seeing from the brands navigating this well in 2026. They are not panicking. They are not panic buying inventory to get ahead of freight increase, because panic buying turns a supply chain problem into a cash flow crisis. They are auditing their DDP exposure, which SKUs are on DDP. What is freight cost as a percentage of COGS? Which ones are high duty, high weight, or rescue prone? They are recalculating landed costs with the new reality. Real numbers, new unit economics, no assumptions. They are having proactive conversations with freight forwarders and suppliers this week, not waiting for surprise invoices. And they are looking at their inventory positions for Q3 and Q4 right now. Not in June, right now. Because in a volatile freight environment with extended lead times, the brands that plan 6 months out have options. The brands that plan 8 weeks out have emergencies. I want to bring you back to where we started, to history. The people who navigated supply chain during World War II, when factories were commandeered and materials were rationed. They didn't have a playbook. They had to write one. The people who survived the 1973 oil embargo, who watched fuel prices quadruple in months, they didn't have a playbook. They wrote one. The businesses that rebuilt after the 1918 pandemic, the merchants who rerouted after the 1956 Suez closure, the brands that rebuilt supplier networks after disasters disrupted global component supply. Every single one of them faced a moment where the old rules were gone and the new rules didn't exist yet. And every single one of them, the ones that survived, found the same thing. They found each other. They shared intelligence. They shared supplier contacts. They shared what was working and what wasn't. They built communities of practices where the knowledge moved faster than the crisis. That's the actual playbook, not just the 7 rules, not just the Incoterm decision and safety stocks formulas and freight signal monitoring. Those are the tactics. The strategy is this: we do this together. And what I've noticed across 17 years and 4 crises, the brand that gets blindsided are almost always the ones trying to figure it out alone. They don't want to show vulnerability. They don't want to admit they're scrambling, so they scramble in silence. And by the time they ask for help, they're already behind. And the brands that come out stronger, they talk, they share, they ask uncomfortable questions early. They pick up the phone and ask, "What are you seeing?" Because two sets of eyes see more than one, and 10 sets of eyes see almost everything. That's why I do what I do, not because I have all the answers. I've shown you today exactly how many times I've been wrong, surprised, humbled by how fast the world can change. But because I genuinely believe that when supply chain people share what they know, freely and generously, everyone wins. Our brands win, our clients win, the whole DTC ecosystem gets more resilient. We are living through something that will be in case study someday. And I think the case study should say this was the generation that finally figured out how to share the playbook in real time. This was the generation that stopped treating supply chain knowledge as a competitive secret and started treating it as a shared defense. So here's what I want you to do. Not just the seven rules, though yes, please do those. Talk to someone, share this video with an operator friend who's struggling, join a community where real supply chain conversations happen, ask your supplier what they're seeing, ask your freight forwarder what's coming. Be the person on your team who says, "I've been paying attention and here's what I'm learning." Because the brand that win in this era are not going to win because they had a better algorithm or a slightly lower landed cost. They're going to win because they had better information, shared faster, and built resilience as a team, not as a solo mission. The seven rules, one final time. Number one, know your landed cost by line item. Always, no exceptions. Number two, diversify your origin or at a minimum, have the code before you need it. Number three, take Incoterm control on your top SKUs. FOB over DDP in the volatile markets. Number four, monitor freight signals weekly, spot rates, carrier announcements, insurance, and air capacity. Number five, build real supplier relationships, not just transactional ones. They only pay off in a crisis. Number six, hold cash buffers and inventory buffers. Lean is a fair weather strategy. Number seven, scenario plan quarterly. Ask what happens if freight goes up 20%, if lead times double, if duties spike, and an eighth rule, the one history taught me that I did not learn in any textbook. Don't do this alone. If you've stayed with me this whole hour, thank you. That means more than you know. Here's what I'm offering you right now. Comment Survivor below and I'll send you the supply chain survivor checklist. All seven rules in the fillable format with specific action steps for each one. Print it, put it in your desk, use it. If you want to be part of a community where supply chain conversations like this happen every week, not just when there's crisis, join our Slack community. The link is in the description. It's free, it's full of real operators asking real questions. That's the together part. And subscribe because I'm going to keep making videos like this, not because I enjoy the sound of my own voice, but because every week there's something new to understand. And I'd rather we understand it together than separately. Supply chain has survived wars, pandemics, embargoes, and the complete reinvention of global trade more than once. It will survive 2026. And so will your brand. I'm Lara. This is Move Supply Chain. I'll see you in the next one.